I didn't have anyone lined up to do to have a conversation this week, and I want to do these weekly. Um, and I've been thinking, and I have a lot to talk about. I've been moving very quickly, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot that needs to be said. So I figured that I would do a kind of like a solo episode, and just keep it quick, and do a little bit of a debrief, and um, I guess put out my thoughts on this stuff and where we are right now as a field, at least from my perspective. Um, so generally speaking, uh, I view the field of sci, like a lot of other technological fields, as accelerating rapidly due to the use and mass adoption of blockchain technology and of artificial intelligence and integrating those into sci specific tools. Two things are being done. One, sci, specifically remote viewing, is being proven at a level of scientific validation that cannot be shot down. In the past, there were great studies, great meta analyses, but the problem is that there's always a bit of concern, or there's a bit of worry in the back of people's minds that there's some methodological flaw, or there was some sort of cheating, or some sort of sensory leakage. What blockchain technology has allowed for is for literally any skeptic to go and verify any session that's on the blockchain, and that goes through one of these verification systems, prove that the correct target in the pool was not even picked when the remote viewing session impressions were uploaded. The other part of this technology is, specifically artificial intelligence is allowing for the realized effect size of remote viewing to become greater. And what I mean by that is if we assume that any specific viewer or an aggregate of a specific set of remote viewers on average has X percentage raw effect size greater than chance, that's if the judging was perfect. You would realize that raw effect size. The judging isn't perfect, so therefore your actual realized effect size with your imperfect judging technology is going to be somewhere in between the potential of the real effect size and in chance expectation. And artificial intelligence specifically is, and how we implement that with judging, is allowing for that realized effect size to continuously improve. And as AI models get better, and as new judging technology gets better, that realized effect size is going to be greater and greater and greater, and remote viewing is going to become more and more consistent. I'll give you an example. I've been testing different AI models with the same exact flow, the same exact logic flow, the same exact judging system. I tested GPT-4o, and my site ARV Collective had a realized raw effect size of, I think, in between 1.5 and 2%, and I ran the same data set on Gemini 3 Flash, which is a much newer state-of-the-art model that specifically, it excels everywhere, but it really, really, really excels with vision and being able to see the contents of the images and perform logic based off that. And the realized effect size essentially doubled from that, if not more. If it didn't go up 100%, it went up like 120% with the same exact flow, right? I didn't change anything else about the judge. I literally have a logic works or what data was fed to it, the same exact sessions, just using a better model. So I don't know where that cap is. I don't know what the actual aggregate effect size of remote viewing is. I don't know what it is for the best viewers in the world. I don't know what it is if you aggregate a massive set of viewers. Right now on ARV Collective, our aggregate effect size across like 750, I think we're at like 800 sessions now, is around 4.5 or 5% better than chance, which is astounding. It's great. So those two technologies, blockchain is allowing us to prove the authenticity of remote viewing sessions beyond a shadow of a doubt, and artificial intelligence is allows us to build tools to realize the effect size in a greater way. Those two things are relatively new in the grand scheme of things. Those two technologies, and now they're finally getting applied to sci, and I think that we're going to have absolutely astounding, very, very, very quick progress in the sci field, and I really do think that this field is going to explode in popularity. I think that within the next 6 months to 2 years, it's going to be accepted by the mainstream academic, whatever you call it, conglomerate or complex or whatever. I do think that at least certain aspects of Psi are going to get accepted by the mainstream. And if you look at what happens by that, I mean, besides there just being social ramifications, if you look at how it affects the field, we're going to start getting real funding and real talent put towards this field. That's the problem, and that's kind of the bad part, or one of the bad parts about being neglected by mainstream science, is that you don't get any of the good talent. All of the good talent, they're all working on string theory, or they're trying to they're going into physics, they're going into engineering, things like that. When Psi gets accepted, we're going to start getting really good talent. And there's going to be a lot of investment in this field because of the potential to operationalize it and what kind of economic impact that'll have. So it's going to be great for everybody. It's going to be great for, what I'm most excited about is the viewers. And that was, part of my vision with ARV Collective is just making remote viewing a meritocracy where all sessions are public. People who are really good remote viewers, they'll get very low p-values, their sessions are public, and they can participate in public bounties and essentially make money off this. That is going to increase 1,000-fold. I really do think over the next 6 months to 2 years, it's going to happen very fast. And once that happens, and even potentially before that happens, the next question that you have, after you realize that this stuff is real and after it's proven that it's real, is to what extent can it be operationalized, right? So the best data that is on the cutting edge right now is precognitive remote viewing, where you are remote viewing images. The images come from a predetermined, albeit large, but predetermined target pool, and you get immediate feedback. To what extent that effect size will translate to operational remote viewing, how easy that is to do, if it's possible at all, I don't know. There's definitely been some accounts of people, doing this successfully, like Greg, I believe I'm saying his last name at least somewhat correctly, Kolajczyk, with the time machine experiment. He's done good work with it. I'm sure a lot of people have heard, Hal Pavlov's account of operationalizing it and making remote viewing economically viable. It's really up in the air. I think that's the biggest deciding factor when it comes to where this stuff goes and how it impacts humanity. Because if there is a one-to-one ability to translate remote viewing to things that have an economic impact, I've thought about this a little bit. There needs to be more brain power in this field to think through complex things like that. But if you imagine a world where big companies and hedge funds and whatever start pouring a ton of money into associative remote viewing research and start operationalizing it, and these large teams who have a good realized effect size and large data sets, they start to, with a very, very, very high success rate, predict market outcomes. You think about what that would do to financial markets. And I honestly don't know. My best current guess is that it would just basically kill speculation when it comes to markets and investing. There would be no speculation involved. Everyone would essentially know the future outputs of different currencies or assets or whatever. And people would still invest, but it would be algorithmic. You would know what the best investments are. I think that that would change with social structures, and weird things would happen in terms of deciding who gets to invest in what. We need to have better talent and more intelligence working on this problem, because it potentially has dramatic effects. And I don't think it's going to be catastrophic. At least not something that's catastrophic that humanity can't recover from, but I think it's going to cause a vast restructuring of certain social and economic systems that we have. And something I also want to get to, the reason that I decided to work on this so much is because I believe that there is a very, very good chance that remote viewing and sci in general is something that, and I don't say this lightly, truly has the potential to save humanity. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. As technology progresses, energy density becomes greater, right? If you look at energy density 100,000 years ago, I mean, what was it? Fire was the most energy dense thing that we have. And as technology gets better, then you get dynamite, then you get computers, which is a higher, density of intelligence, and then you get, more and more powerful bombs, and then you get things like bioweapons, and all of this stuff just comes with technology. And as technology gets better, the other side of it, besides like the maximum potential, I guess, technology that you have access to, is the distribution of that technology becomes greater, and more people get access to it. That's something that naturally happens with technological progress over time, and technology is accelerating rapidly with hardware and with artificial intelligence. It's literally a recursive, accelerating feedback loop, and the amount of the potential density of power that's going to be at the hands of normal individuals and a mass number of normal average everyday individuals is going to increase, faster and faster and faster. And that's very dangerous, right? If you have, technology get in the hands of 100,000 people where they could potentially, produce a bioweapon or use artificial intelligence to destroy a piece of, like a critical piece of software infrastructure, that becomes more and more dangerous and more high risk. And I don't, that's a hard problem to solve. You either stop the technology or you try to gatekeep it, which is tough. You're playing Russian roulette if you try to gatekeep super good artificial intelligences, for example, because all it takes is one time to slip up. I see a potential future with Psi, where Psi is the stabilizing factor in a world with massively distributed, powerful technology. And let me just say the reason that I think that it could stabilize a scenario like that is because I do think that better Psi ability inherently produces more benevolent individuals, because a big part of Psi, in my personal belief with how it works, is it has to do with a collective consciousness. It has to do with a literal physical interconnectivity of consciousness and of everything that exists. And Psi is how people realize that, Psi or Psi adjacent skills. And if everybody realizes that we're essentially the same collective consciousness, people can't steal from each other anymore. People can't murder each other anymore, because you're hurting yourself. You realize that you're hurting yourself, and not saying that malevolence would completely go away in that scenario, but I think it becomes much more uncommon and difficult to do. And that scenario doesn't remove free will, assuming it exists. That scenario, it only just incentivizes benevolence through a greater knowledge, essentially, is the way that I think about it. So that's from a theoretical point of view why I think it could, help in the highly dangerous scenario that we're entering. The other thing, the other reason that I think that is because, I came to parapsychology and to Psi and to remote viewing from UFO worlds. I get that not everyone listening to this might be, might not believe in the UFO stuff, or might not be educated on it. But I personally, I think it's real. I think that there's a ton of evidence for it. And one of my favorite ways to gather information and to analyze the UFO and the non-human intelligence stuff is you look at different accounts from as vastly different sources as possible, right? There are historical accounts going back, thousands, tens of thousands of years of interactions with non-human intelligence. There are accounts from decades or hundreds of years ago. There are accounts from modern day. So you look at these different time periods across these different time periods, individuals on different continents who, at least in the past, had no access or no communication with each other, and you look at their accounts and you cross-reference what are the common denominators between these accounts of individuals who have these experiences, who have no contact with each other, no way to communicate. And one of the common denominators that I've noticed, at least, is there seems to be some sort of a psi effect with these non-human intelligences. Either these non-human intelligences are interacting with some sort of telepathy or some sort of an information transfer with the humans they're interacting with, or these non-human intelligent entities are interacting with each other in some sort of a telepathic way. Either way, some sort of a psi or telepathic effect seems to be a common denominator, which leads me to believe that it's most likely true. It's most likely real. And that conclusion is one of the main reasons I got interested in parapsychology and remote viewing and all of that stuff. And that got me thinking, from a logical point of view, right? You look at the Fermi paradox, and there's part of that is an argument about how I made what I made earlier, which is essentially civilizations might naturally self-destruct. And you look at all these accounts of interactions with between humans and non-human intelligences, and the common denominator is psi. The common denominator with those is also that, it's confirmation bias that all of the non-human intelligences that are able to reach us, albeit from another plane or from they're three-dimensional entities like us, just coming from another point in space or time or space-time, they have to be incredibly technologically advanced, or at least they most likely are, or at least some of them are most likely highly technologically advanced, and those they also all seem to have some sort of a psi ability. And those two things, because of those reasons, seem to go hand in hand. And my personal theory is that psi is kind of required for species to survive once they reach a certain level of technological prowess. Because any species who reaches a certain level of technological prowess but doesn't have the psi side of things will self-destruct because of a lack of understanding of collective consciousness, a lack of understanding, and a lack of collective benevolence. So viewing it from that point of view, I think that there's I'm not saying that this is 100% certain, but it definitely needs to go into your calculation, or at least my calculation, that psi might be an ingredient that is literally make or break for humanity, for humanity's future, because of the dangers. I've already been over it. I don't need to go over it again. Anyways, though, that's my vision with all this stuff. That's why I'm so incredibly interested in it, and why I'm passionate about working on it. In terms of how I'm trying to reach that goal, I think what needs to happen is psi needs to get accepted by the mainstream. I chose to work on remote viewing not only because it's very interesting, but because it's compared to the other forms of psi, it's easy to study scientifically and to produce really, really solid data. Like, you can put it, you can use the scientific method and apply it to psi. So I think that what needs to happen is twofold in order to get psi accepted by the mainstream. And like I said, that'll cause the loop of funding, of better talent, and all of that will be a recursive loop. You produce good data, that attracts more talent and funding. That talent and funding produces better data. Recursive self-feedback loop until psi is just ingrained into humanity. There's two ways for that to happen, in my opinion. One of them is just really, really solid research, which is already happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And then the other thing is operationalizing remote viewing. I think that either one of those things, if done successfully and to a certain degree, can cause that feedback loop, that recursive feedback loop of psi getting more and more accepted to happen. The research is already going to happen 100%. Chase and Social RV, what they're doing on that regard, absolutely changing the game. They deserve so much credit with this stuff. Pretty much all the credit with this stuff. They Chase really pioneered it. The other side is operationalizing remote viewing. And I view that, when it comes to the goal of getting it accepted by the mainstream, as a much more high risk but high leverage endeavor. because there is, in my opinion, it might be harder than doing research. And a testament to it being difficult is just the fact that it's been done, but it hasn't been done a lot, and it's been inconsistent. Whereas the research, it seems to be, if you set it up, correctly, and you apply the scientific method and you gather a large data set, you're going to realize some sort of a psi effect. But with operationalizing remote viewing, whether it be like just traditional remote viewing, high value targets where the information actually provides some sort of an impact, whatever, missing individuals or an economic impact or whatever, or you think about associative remote viewing, if either of those are able to be realized on a large scale that makes a real footprint and it's consistent, I think that would have a greater effect on the public than the research. Because if you take an average individual and you try to show them a paper, an academic paper, a peer-reviewed paper, and you start talking to them about p-values and about data set sizes and standard deviations and judging methods and the blockchain and blah 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 blah, even if it's all scientifically valid and there's a great effect size, it's gonna go over most people's heads. They're either not gonna get it, or they're not gonna care, or they're not gonna understand what it means. But if you're able to operationalize remote viewing and cause a consistent footprint that actually matters and does good in the world, I think that people will be much more receptive to that. So, I'm working on both of those things. I'm very invested in just building a great platform, in building great technologies and tools for remote viewers to A, get better at remote viewing, and B, to basically contribute to research, to give more credit and prowess to the field. And then the other thing that I haven't really worked on too much historically, but I'm going to start as I start spending more time on this, is operationalizing remote viewing and really doing intelligent scientific research from the ground up, starting with what we know works with remote viewing, which is precognitive immediate feedback trials with large data sets, and slowly iterating upon variables, so you can see if the effect size breaks, where it breaks, what causes it to break, is there anything, what variables help or hurt the effect size, are there any limits, or anything like that, in terms of how it can be operationalized. I'm going to start doing a lot of research on that, and I plan to be extremely public and transparent about that research. I think it's very important, but those two directions, I think those are the two big levers. So that's what I want to work on. I think that's all I really have to say about this. I mean, there's a bunch of tiny details and research updates that I could get, but I don't want to sit on here and drone. Look, I've already been talking for 25 minutes. I don't want to sit on here and drone for a long time. So I'll leave it there. And we need more intellectual thought and more research and more good minds and more ideas with this field. So I want to encourage anyone listening to participate intellectually. I don't care if you consider yourself an intelligent person, or even if you consider yourself a qualified person to speak about this. I don't think I'm necessarily qualified to speak on this. I don't think that matters, though. I think that any bit that you can add to the dialogue is a good thing, and the community will hash out ideas and come to the best solutions naturally. So please intellectually interact. Any ideas, feedback, any thoughts on the field in general. I think it's very important to get that stuff out and to ignite the conversation more and more, as time goes on and as this stuff accelerates. So I'll leave it there.